Let's start by talking about the pasuk of this week's parasha, where at the end of the description of how the person brings the bikurim, the first fruits. Actually, the first part of the parasha speaks to how a person brings the first fruits, and then it says how he brings at the end of the third year. He brings all the ma'aser which he owed for the previous years. He brings to the Beis Hamikdash all the tithes, and then he says vidui maser. He says he says a whole formula which is about what that he's fulfilled the what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has asked of him for the past few years, and then it ends this tefillah which he said, this pronunciation, this formula that he recites. It ends Hashkofo mo kotchem min hashamayim v'orechas am cholas Yisrael v'esadom asher nasata lanu kanishbaz asher nishbat v'avosenu eretz avas chalav v'davash. Says, gaze down from your holy abode from the heavens and bless your people Israel and the ground that you gave us as you swore to our forefathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. So we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to look down at us and provide us with this blessing which he promised us. So there's an interesting term used here, Hashkofo. Hashkofo here is translated as to gaze. Chazal say that kol hashkafa shebatorah l'ra. Anytime when it says in the Torah the word hashkafa, it's negative. It has a negative meaning. Except for this one place. Also this place that says Hashkofo mo kotchem min hashamayim. In this one place the meaning is positive. In the rest of the Torah the meaning is negative.
So when you say negative, do you mean negative like morally, or like negative like it just doesn't feel good?
It's bad. In other words, the other classic place where it happens is, two classic places, is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks down at Sodom and Gomorrah, in order to judge them. It says that Vayashkef Hashem al pnei Sodom. He gazed down at Sodom and he decided to destroy it. And then when it says by Kriyas Yamsuf, when he looks at as they were splitting the sea, when he looks at the Egyptians, he looks at the Egyptians, he is Vayashkef on them, and he destroys them as well. So the word Lashkif, when it refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, normally refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's judgment. In other words, Hashem's being harsh. The one difference is over here, where this is Hashkofo mo kotchem min hashamayim u'vorechas am cholas Yisrael. In this place, it's unique in that here it refers to a positive form of perspective. Now, R Shlomo Wolbe takes this idea and he puts it in a little bit of a drush way, and he says that the word Hashkofo, which we use very often in Hebrew for Jewish thought, is a very, very bad word. He says the word Hashkofo actually has a very negative connotation. And he says whenever we use the word Hashkofo in our discussion of Judaism, we're using a word which is very negative. Why is that? Because he says there's a difference between Hashkofo and, let's call it machshava, for want of a better term. Hashkofo means when you take a perspective and you gaze with that perspective onto something. In other words, you take a preconceived notion, and that is your hashkofo. That is what you call your perspective. And you put that perspective onto the thing which you're looking at. That's not a good thing, because that means you're not trying to see what the thing is telling you, but how you can put your perspective on the thing. And this is really one of the primary problems which we have in thinking about things objectively. Because every one of us comes with a preconceived way, a preconceived perspective. And that perspective is the way in which we look at things and we try to assess things. And when we try to assess things based on our pre-existing perspective, we almost inevitably cannot look at things objectively. We're not looking to see what the thing says to us, but rather how we can impose our worldview on the thing. So example, if you're the Satmar Rebbe, everything you look at, and this is going to be with hashkafa of anti-Zionism. If you're a religious Zionist, everything you look at is going to be with hashkafa of religious Zionism. If you are a person who is very much into secular studies, everything you look at is going to be a perspective of Torim Derech Eretz, using secular studies in a proper way. If you're an anti-secular studies person, then you look at it the other way around. If you are somebody who's very much pro-learning Musar, and living a Musar life, then you look at things with a Musar perspective, which is also hashkafa. If you're anti-Musar, you're going to look at things with an anti-Musar perspective, a different kind of hashkafa. Every person comes with a hashkafa to Chazal or to the Torah, and then twists the thing in order to come up with the conclusion he wants. And there's a very interesting Chasam Sofer uses this who takes this give us a beautiful insight on this. One of the Moroim, I believe, was Abaye, who says, "Ana ke'etzba lekira," we are like a finger in the wall in terms of our capacity to learn things relative to previous generations. Meaning that the Tanoim, when they learned something with their svara, with their logic, it was very deep and profound and accurate. And we're like a finger on the wall. In other words, you put your finger on the wall, you might take a little bit of dust off the wall, you might not, and you don't really make much of an impact on the wall. And that means that we don't really take much away from a sugya. When we learn the sugya, when we learn something, even when we think we're learning in depth, we don't take very much away from it. That's the way Rashi interprets that. But kira can mean a wall, but it can also mean something else. Kira in the Gemara can also mean wax. And the Chasim Sofer says, what does it mean if it's wax? It means that you're just like wax. If you touch it with your finger and you hold your finger there for a moment or two so it gets a little bit warm, you can twist it and torture it and change it any which way you want. So too, when we learn something, we take our ideas and twist and turn the sugya in any which way we possibly can.
Is that a bad thing?
Yes. Yes. Chazon Sofer says, that's why he says, Chazon Sofer says, he almost always will try and go with his first impression in a sugya. In other words, when he comes to learn something, he's going to go with the first impression, because if he has time to think about further, he'll always be able to come up with another way of interpreting it, which may well be distorted. Because once you give a matter of thought, you can use sophistry, you can use false logic, use all sorts of tactics and tools in order to come up with the antithesis of what would be the true understanding of the sugya. So therefore, he feels that the first thing he thinks of when it comes to the sugya is probably the closest to objective truth. And then what happens later on when he comes back to it, when he looks at it again, those things, he'll look at it more, but he's more suspicious of those opinions with which he comes up to explain it later on. So the idea of taking a perspective and putting the perspective into into the sugya, into an issue which you are examining, is always a very, very dangerous one, because it won't let you think objectively. You won't be able to think through something and figure out what the real halacha is. And I'll give you an example of how you take Hashkofo and you distort a sugya in a case which I once had a debate about many years ago with another rabbi who was somewhat controversial. And the topic of our debate was whether a Jew is allowed to enter a mosque. A Jew is allowed to enter a mosque. We know that Jews are not supposed to enter churches unless it's completely unavoidable. By churches, I mean the sanctuary of the church. You can go into a side room in a church, but you can't go into the main sanctuary of a church unless there's some real pikuach nefesh of some sort involved. So the question is, okay, what about a mosque? So there's a machlokas haposkim whether a Jew is allowed to enter a mosque or not. The Ran, who was one of the late Rishonim, says a Jew cannot enter a mosque. He says, even though Islam is not avodah zarah, Islam is a monotheistic religion through and through, unlike Christianity. But nevertheless, it is the way they venerate Muhammad in their prayers is basically idolatrous. Whereas they put Muhammad on a pedestal together with God in their prayers, and they worship him with the same type of intensity. So therefore,
don't we also say Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov?
yes, but we don't say it's not the same thing, because the way.
I know,
Yeah,
but
it's,
I know
yeah.
that's what I mean.
Yeah, he says, of course, what they say is more innocuous than they say. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. But the Ran is saying, even though the words don't seem okay, the fact that they bow down on the floor when they say it, right? They have to bow down. It's a form of veneration, which he says is, and they take off their shoes. He says it's a form of veneration which is not on the ground.
No, but like we're bowing at that same point.
But not to God, not to Muhammad.
No, we don't. The halacha is.
You're supposed to raise your head before you say, okay, Abraham, okay, Yitzchak, okay, Yaakov.
Yeah, but I'm saying beforehand, before you do that.
Right, before. Right, but not when you say the names of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. In any event, that's what the Ran says. The Ran says, even though it's not about Zorah, their form of prayer is to venerate Muhammad so much, and therefore you should not enter a mosque. The Rambam and Shulchan Aruch do not bring down any prohibitions to enter a mosque, even though they do bring down prohibitions to enter churches. So in later day poskim, the Tzitz Eliezer, who was a very distinguished Ashkenazi posek, lived in Yerushalayim. Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef is a very distinguished Sephardi posek, who lived in Yerushalayim, had a big machlokes. The machlokes, the Tzitz Eliezer says that because the Ran, who is a Rishon, says you can't enter a mosque, so therefore you can't enter a mosque. Rav Yosef says, and this actually is very consistent with his methodology of Psak in many different places. He says that if the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch don't say anything about a subject, we are not bound by what the Ran says. In other words, there is a hierarchy among the Rishonim of the in terms of halacha. The top tier poskim among the Rishonim are the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam. And the next tier are Rashi and Tosfos and the Rashba and others of that sort. And then there's the third tier. And the third tier is like the Ran and the Mukhi Yosef and maybe the Mordechai, a third level of poskim. So the Tzitz Eliezer says, what difference does it make if it's the third level of poskim? They're still Rishonim. The Rabbi Yosef says, no, the only Rishonim which we're bound to follow are the top level Rishonim. Maybe the second level, but not the third level.
We can go into the mosque today.
What?
We can go
It's
into
a machlekes. So Tzitz Eliezer says, you can't go into a mosque.
So I'm saying like halacha l'maisa is in Maras HaMachpelah, where you have the Yitzchak's caver, which is currently a functioning mosque.
Right. So according to Rav Yosef, you're allowed to go without any question. According to Tzitz Eliezer, you would have to say that on the days that they allow Jews to go in, it's not functioning as a mosque. Okay, but otherwise you're right. You would not be able to go in. According to Tzitz Eliezer, if it was a mosque, which you happen to visit on those days. Okay? So they have an interest in a similar machlokes applies between Rav Yosef and the Chazon Ish. Although there are many other people involved in that machlokes concerning the international date line. The international date line halacha, according to the Kuzari and the Baal Amor, who are Rishonim, but third tier Rishonim, so to speak, is 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim. But the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch don't say where the halachic international date line is. So Rav Yosef says it's true that these Rishonim said it's 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim, but the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch don't put it anywhere. So if the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch don't say anything, we're not bound by the Kuzari and the Baal Mor, and therefore we can put it wherever we want. And we might as well put it where the second international date line is, because that's the most convenient for us in terms of not having any halachic clashes. So Ravadia has the shita again that when Rambam and Shulchan Aruch don't say anything, we're not required to follow other Rishonim, and we can paskin as we please. Okay, so that is the context of machlokas. It's a very basic, straightforward machlokas as to methodology of psak. But this other rabbi with whom I was having this debate, he said, no, that's not the meaning of that's not the way to frame the debate. The way to frame the debate is that Tzitz Eliezer came from, even though they both live in Yerushalayim, Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Yosef, but Tzitz Eliezer came from Ashkenazic background. And Ashkenazic background is one in which the Christianity predominated as the lifestyle and religion of non-Jews. Whereas Rav Yosef came from a Sephardic background, a Dota Mizrach, from Iraq. And there, the predominant form of non-Jewish worship was Islam. So the Tzitz Eliezer took his bias from his perspective on Christianity, applied it to Islam, and thus came up with a prohibition to enter a mosque, just like a church. Whereas Rav Yosef took his bias, which was independent of Christianity, and looked at Islam just in and of itself, and therefore came to the conclusion that Islam is perfectly fine. One can enter into a mosque without any problem. So this way, if a person takes this perspective on analyzing a machlokas, one looks at then a machlokas does not become an objective search for truth. It's an analysis of Hashkofo. What perspectives the posek is bringing into his preconceived notions, he's bringing into the question, and that, of course, would lead us to dismiss his objectivity and question anything he might have posken. He gave another example at the time, the rabbi. He said we have a machlokas between the Rambam and the Tosfos. Can women make brachas on mitzvah seishas man groma? Can they make brachas on lulav, on shofar, on other mitzvahs say, which are time bound? The Rambam holds they may not. The Rabbeinu Tam holds they may. So the machlekes, as depicted in the poskim, is whether women could say Asher Kiddushaну mitzvah tzivanu. Can they say that they are commanded on these mitzvahs when in fact they're not actually commanded? They're not obligated to do them, so therefore they're not truly commanded. It's good. Asher Kiddushanu mitzvah tzivanu specifically talking about the person doing the mitzvah. It's talking about Am Yisrael. If it's talking about Am Yisrael, then even they can make, because they're part of the Jewish people. If it's talking about the people performing the mitzvah, they can't make these brachas. So the Rambam holds they cannot, and Rabbeinu Tam holds they can. So the way this rabbi wanted to explain the machlekes, again based on Hashkofo, based on perspective, is that the Rambam lived in the backwards Arab and Muslim countries, where the population was misogynist, they're anti-women, whereas Rabbeinu Tam lived in the forward-thinking, enlightened, proto-feminist northern Christian countries, in which the population was much more enlightened. So therefore, the Rambam paskin that women can't make a bracha mitzvah man grama because he was anti-feminist, and the Rabbeinu Tam paskin that they could make a bracha mitzvah man grama because he was pro-feminist. So I said to him at the time, I said, the piece of legislation which is most profoundly anti-women, which we have in Judaism today, it was authored by Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam is the one who came up with the principle that a woman cannot demand a divorce simply because she doesn't want to live with the husband anymore. In other words, that's not sufficient grounds for us to compel the husband to divorce her. Yeah. We pass it. We do. We're machmir, yes. It's not enough, really. There has to be another reason. Tzitz Eliezer has a fasting tshuva in which a husband shot at his wife, but missed. And the question is whether you can compel a divorce under those circumstances.
Absolutely.
Well, Tzitz Eliezer had a hard time proving it.
Wow.
Yes, so he did say so, yes. But the point is that because of Rabbeinu Tam, we have difficulty compelling husbands to divorce their wives. So I said to him, Rabbeinu Tam is responsible for the single most misogynistic, so to speak, law we have on the books towards women today.
It's not wrong if we post something like that.
I didn't say it's wrong. On the contrary, I'm just saying that the idea that people paskin based on their hashkafa is a very dangerous and wrong one, and we assume only do not paskin on the basis of their hashkafa. Any person who paskins on the basis of their hashkafa is distorting halacha. Okay? So that's the principle. The idea of hashkafa is, again, one takes preconceived notions. One takes the perspective with which one comes in, and then approaches the Torah and molds the Torah in order to make the Torah work the way his hashkafa leads him. That's not the way a person's obviously supposed to approach Torah. The way a person's supposed to approach Torah is by seeing what the Torah said, and that in itself is very difficult. I had a Rosh Hashiva once said to us that you can take any outlandish perspective and find a statement in Chazal which you can twist to support it. Because there's so many statements in Chazal, and some of them are ambiguous. You know, they're hard to understand. They're obscure. That you can take one and twist it and say, "Oh, this proves my point." Right? One can say, as we probably find nowadays, although I don't know for sure, one could say, I can prove from Chazal that you have to vote for Trump. Or I can prove from Chazal that you have to vote for Biden. In fact, you can't prove either thing from Chazal, and if you can prove that from Chazal, then you probably distorted Chazal in a way which is very severe and significant.
Is there any issue of the halacha? Because whenever there's, I see a Yiddish Biden supporter, they act like he's breaking halacha. It's almost like he's a Machal Shabbos.
Who is?
Yid who supports Biden.
I intend to vote for Biden.
Wow.
Why?
I intend to vote for Biden because I'm almost 60 years old. Biden is promising Medicare at age 60. I have lost a job recently. I lost my health insurance. I can't get affordable health insurance. Any of the health insurance I can get is also going to go up on October 1st. The net allows the other Jews to get is going to go up 20%. My wages have not gone up under Trump at all, not at all, and I have not gotten a raise since he became president. And furthermore, because I live in New York State, he has cost me thousands and thousands of dollars in extra taxes because he took away the exemption for property and state taxes from federal tax. So therefore, Trump has been absolutely horrible for me and brought me to the brink of insolvency. Why in the world would I vote for them? Teacher. I was a professor. I was a professor when the new supervisor came in and eliminated the department. She just.
Oh, you were a professor? What professor?
Well, I have a lot of jobs.
Where were you as a professor?
Judaic Studies, Excelsior College.
Oh.
So I don't see. There's
A
no.
professor is different from like the corporate world.
Right. So I have, but so my world, I have nothing from. I don't get anything from Trump. Maybe if I was a gvir, I was a rich man, and I was in the corporate world and doing high flying speculation and business, maybe then I would vote for Trump. But for me,
I'll tell you one thing: if Biden were president, I would not be happy. I mean, I would be
why would
very
you not be
nervous.
happy? What does it make to you?
I'll tell you why. Because
He'll give you yeshivas more money. You know that.
You what?
Of course.
If he remembers.
Yeah, of course. No, they give more money to education. The Democrats give much more money to education than the Republicans
I'm not,
do.
like, so in favor to the Jews or anything.
But what's wrong? No, why? He'll get more money. There'll be more food programs. There's somebody who said, and this is not a, it's not a nice, and I don't like the quote because it's a bit racist, but somebody said once, that I forget who it was, that Jews live like Puerto Ricans and vote like billionaires. Because Jews all get Section 8, in places where it's available. They get a WIC, they get welfare, and yet they don't vote that way.
And then they talk
That's
a lot
funny.
about the socialist Democrats
Yes.
while they're living on.
It's
Well, I'm living on social programs, yes.
I'm happy that you think for yourself. Very.
Thank you.
Do you really think for yourself?
I do.
It's,
I try.
In my opinion, I'd be very scared for the country. If Biden.
I'm scared for the country right now. But I don't see that Trump is going to be the one who's going to resolve anything for this country. If anything, he enjoys make it worse. Their games. There's a game I used to play, a video game. It's called Sim City. Ever play Sim City? In Sim City, you build cities, and you can inflict. Part of the fun of the game is that you inflict disasters on the cities every so often, earthquakes, tidal waves, crime waves, and then try and get out of the scenario. That's what Trump is. He likes inflicting all sorts of scenarios on the people and then seeing what happens. So
where were you where were you a professor?
online, Excelsior College was called.
Excelsior College. And how did you lose your
Yeah,
job?
a lot of Jews do it.
Yeah.
A lot of
How
Jews
did you
do
lose
it.
your job?
The new supervisor came in. She fired all the old staff and hired her own staff. Because New York State is an employment at will state. Your employer can fire you if they don't like the size of your nose. As long as it does fall into the one protected categories.
Approve of that.
Sure he does. This is capitalism in its finest form. Of course. All capitalists approve of that. Well, Trump likes being able to fire employees at will anytime. He does it all the time.
It depends. If they're not doing their job properly.
No. It's nothing to do with that. If he doesn't like their faces. That's the way it
Not because
works.
He doesn't like their faces. If they're not doing their job properly.
Who determines it? He determines it, right?
So you went to that college and said we're lowering?
No, he didn't say anything. I'm just saying this is capitalist America. In a socialist country, you'd have protections against that. People will not be able to be fired at will. I'm not saying it's going to change, but the point is that now, because of Trump's economy, I can't find another job of that sort. It's very hard to find a job.
The economy has been doing very well.
Not for me.
The economy has been pretty bad under the COVID.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but
if Trump hadn't got rid of the pandemic team he had in place before he came into office, we might have fared a lot better.
Yeah.
So
I'm not saying he's all bad either, by the way.
But I think the economy,
Until-
I think the economy was rebuilding up.
But it's
after
not. Right now it's
the
not.
opening.
Right now it's not. And there's no prospect of it in the future. People are losing jobs, thousands and thousands of people losing jobs every day. I don't know what I don't know what the answer is. I'm not an expert.
Any better?
What?
Think Joe Biden will be any better?
Yeah, he'll give more money to the people.
Where's the money coming from?
I don't know, but
Or
Trump,
taxes.
but Trump,
Taxing the
I don't care where it comes from. They also give universal health insurance, which to me is amazing. It's an extraordinary thing, which I believe in. Rabbi Yashiv writes that the society is mechuyev to have universal health insurance.
terrible universal health insurance.
It's a chiyuv.
I mean, we basically
Yeah,
have
It's an obligation.
And
Dina demachos sedina, therefore it's not a chiyuv.
That you can argue with. No. Rav Yashiv says a government is mechuyev to provide health insurance for its citizens. The fact the United States doesn't is a avla. It's a bad thing, not a good thing.
I don't think it's
It's
a
not.
either or
The
thing.
universal
Like,
health insurance.
if we look at the economy of ancient Israel, it wasn't one or the other. It was a mixed economy. You had one little tribe having all of these, including health insurance, I'm sure, being provided by the rest of the tribes. Everything provided for them.
Right.
They didn't even have to own their own land, which is how you took care of yourself.
Right.
back then.
How many Rebbeim got fired because of this pandemic?
I'm sure quite a few. But schools can't support them anymore.
I also lost my job.
We have a clause. They put
What do you
a.
do?
I teach.
I managed the store.
I teach in a day school in Passaic in the afternoons, Historia, and they put a clause in our contracts this year which say that they can fire us at any time, at any moment, with no cause whatsoever, because of the economy.
Well, that's not Trump. That's just the fact that that's regular business. If they can't afford you, then they can't afford. That's not
Right.
anything on Trump.
Right. That's why.
individual business.
But unfortunately, the Democrats are more likely to provide better unemployment benefits for those of
They
us.
leech off the government.
Fine.
That's-
I'm fine. I'm fine with the government.
Yeah, but then that's paying for by people who make the money and
That's fine.
spend.
I have no problem with
Okay, so as someone who now wants to work, then nothing's pushing me to now go work. If there's
that. Okay, so don't go work.
So the entire government would be leeching off. the
Okay,
system.
well, worry about it when it happens. Usually speaking, generally speaking, even in social,
That logic of saying that I have no reason to go and work, you could apply that to the laws of Torah. Like, I gotta get work
Yeah.
according to my field. I'm not gonna work then. Like that's
No,
not.
that's
Generally speaking, even in socialist,
I understand that.
even socialist countries,
No,
But there was socialism in Torah. You had to take care of the Levite, even if you just. happened to be-
the Torah is closest to.
Then you can give people tzedakah. You don't need to.
No,
Yeah,
you have obligations.
no, you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
In a welfare state, the Torah is a welfare statist form of government.
It's a mix. It's capitalism
Yes.
and socialism.
It's a welfare state. It's not a socialist government. It's a welfare state, just like Sweden, just
Yeah,
like
right.
right.
According to Rav Eliasha, that's already bad. That needs to be completely provided by the government. And the Torah doesn't.
Healthcare, not anything else. Healthcare.
And how come Jews vote Republican today then?
They don't. They vote
That's not
Democrat.
according. I'm talking
Well,
about from Jews.
The non-religious ones vote Democrat, but the religious ones very much vote
Yeah.
Because they
Republican.
don't want to give all their money.
There's a problem because many of the Democrats, we believe, are immoral. I don't think Republicans are more moral necessarily because, like we just had this evangelist in Liberty University who was fired from his job because it turned out that he was involved in all sorts of nus that happened, all sorts of what's the word? Illicit, not illicit, inappropriate activity. So I think that they're mostly hypocrites among the Republicans, and they're not really more moral than the Democrats, but they do assert that they're higher morality, and that is the reason why many Jews vote for Republicans, because they claim to be more moral than the Democrats.
Yeah.
I want to ask you something. Were you for Obama during
No.
his last year? No.
I voted for McCain, and I voted for Romney.
Good.
Why?
How come?
Why do we try to act like Obama was an anti-Semite? Even though he.
I have a group on Facebook. I'm on Facebook called Orthodox Jews Against Discrimination and Racism. I founded it in
I'm in
2010.
that group. That's you?
That's me.
Hey, I'm in there.
Yeah? What's your name?
Don't worry.
How come you didn't vote for Obama?
Okay. So, because in 2010, I was teaching back in Toras Dovid's predecessor institution, Ohr Somayach. So at the time, there was an incident in Eretz Yisrael where there was a bunch of Sephardi kids in Emmanuel who were not allowed into an Ashkenazi school. And it became a tremendous brouhaha. And the Gedol, many Ashkenazi Gedolim said, go out and protest in the streets that they shouldn't chas v'shalom allow the Sephardi kids into the Ashkenazi schools. And there were...
Obama didn't.
What's that? No, it was Obama. This is before Obama. And so then there were kids here in the Ohr Somayach were saying, is this what I joined Orthodoxy for? I joined Orthodoxy in order that I should have to become a racist. I have to be able to look down on people, look down, if I'm Ashkenazi, I have to look down on Sephardim. So I figured that somebody at that time had to be a rabbi who got up and said, no, you don't have to buy into this. This is Hashkofo. This is not authentic Judaism. This is perspective which is taken from elsewhere and grafted onto Judaism.
And what's their proof from Gemara's right now?
What?
What's their proof?
They have. You mean what Gemara is the reliant to say that we should exclude against Sephardim?
Yeah.
Chayecha koydmim. Your life comes first. It means if I'm my Ashkenazi institution, it's going to be imperiled by having Sephardim in it, because its reputation is going to go down. Then I can exclude them because
which
it's
Gedolim,
many of them. I don't want to say.
But I just want to know so I can stay away from them.
Well, it's 10 years ago. Most of them are not alive anymore, so we don't
But
think that's much.
are they still looked up to?
Yes.
So what was the reason you didn't vote for Obama?
What? Because it's anti-Israel.
Oh,
But no,
Joe
but
Biden is
Biden's
not
not.
Biden's not anti-Israel.
He's not.
Biden's not anti-Israel. He's an old-time Democrat who's not anti-Israel. Obama was anti-Israel. Obama was not as pro-Israel as McCain and Romney would have been. And pro-anti-Israel is always my first.
All the Muslims on his side for the immigration laws to allow all the Muslims.
I don't care if I don't have a problem with Muslims per se. I only have a problem with anti-Israel. I only have a problem with Hezbollah and Hamas. And I don't believe that Biden's going to make a problem with that. And I don't believe he's going to put the embassy back in Tel Aviv. I think that whatever Trump accomplished, for which I have a Karasa Tov, he accomplished. That's good, and they'll build on that.
I find it hard to. I would not feel comfortable if there's an abundance of Muslims who now come into America and start implementing Sharia law into their neighborhoods, where you see in London where there's stabbing attacks, they have to minimize guns, and the knife can only be a certain amount.
Well,
It can't be over 8 inches or something because they use it to stab against a woman.
Well, I'm also anti-Second Amendment.
Interesting.
You are?
Yeah.
You're what?
You should
Anti-Second
we will
Amendment.
fight for
Yeah,
ourselves.
I think-
Somebody's about to stab us, Chas v'shalom.
Down the road.
Something-
Literally
What?
down the road.
The Second Amendment is meant. The Second Amendment is meant that if there is a tyranny which arises in the United States, individuals will be able, with their muskets, to go out and
No,
fight the
right
tyranny.
The right to regulate means that all of a sudden one random day when a tyranny they're like, oh, let's start finding guns. No, you have to have
Right,
guns.
you have to have muskets. You have to have muskets. Yeah, that's what it was about. It was that every citizen should have a musket, so that when they need a new
It says
Minutemen,
arms, it doesn't say
right.
musket.
But the point is like this: they were
Purpose to
muskets.
protect
Today,
yourself.
in order to overcome the government of the United States, you're going to have tanks and air bombers and fighters.
Okay,
You
so
can't
let's have
overcome.
that.
Okay, so that's the Second Amendment. That
So
would be
then-
insanity.
no,
That's
so
more
what's
dangerous.
wrong with that?
Oh, I don't want people to have tanks.
Okay, but if the
That's what happened in the
Constitution
war. So soldiers came up back in the Freikorps and made militias in the streets, and they had tanks and they had all sorts of other weapons, and eventually they came up with
Again,
Nazis.
if let's say the Second Amendment does condone tanks and
I don't want it.
drones, then who cares? The amendment allows it. You might not like the healthcare system, so then
Yeah, I
you
don't
might
want-
not like that either. But
I don't want
that's the
citizens to.
reality of
I don't want
it.
citizens to have tanks. I would overturn.
Okay,
It's
so
not
if
up to me.
It doesn't. You're not allowed to have tanks, and they
But
make
so then it doesn't do any good. Manavshach. How is it doing any good?
Because allegedly you have now people who say that, oh, police are their own private militia. So then now let's say somebody comes into my house, a woman in Texas who had a gun and left it upstairs and opened up her door and got shot in the face by a bunch of armed robbers.
Right,
Got
her gun
killed.
didn't do any good.
And so they say, oh, well, sure, well, her gun didn't do any good. Had she had a gun, then she wouldn't have been able to.
I have no idea, but all I know is that people like Kyle Rittenhouse, when they get guns, they go out and they shoot people.
And the people who don't have guns end up getting shot. It's only the criminals are the ones getting the
I don't
guns,
think
and
that
then you
that's
get
the case.
innocent people.
I don't think
Or
that's the
South
case.
Chicago.
I think that
South Chicago, everybody's getting
Again,
shot.
I think that other countries which have strict gun laws have far fewer homicides and far fewer.
London has a higher
That's right.
homicide rate.
I don't
than
believe that
America,
that's true.
And London,
I don't believe it's true. And even well, last time I looked up was one of Jew. I'm happy to reconsider, but that is my my opinion about the Second Amendment. We aren't entitled to have our opinion about the Second Amendment, right?
yeah.
Okay, just
Does
check.
it have any Ger rice approved?
No,
About what?
Hey, Yishomer's not.
that's not what Sherman's Nafsha is going on. Again, that's an example of taking a chazal and using it out of context.
No, it's an
Islam
example.
the way chazal used it is preserve your health, not
Your
preserve
life.
your...
Not your life.
No. It's not the way chazal use it.
So then if you, let's say, get shot, then you're technically in bad health. So then again, you're not in good health.
Yeah, well, you're right, of course. You can take a chazal and use it any way you want, but that's how chazal meant.
So they just meant that it was fine to put yourself in harm's way.
Chazal said that you should be careful about your own personal health. Not that you
Exactly.
should not that you should have a
And
knife.
so if people
They
have
never
knives
said
and
no.
guns and people get injured-
No, Chazal could have very easily have said keep a knife in your house. They didn't. Chazal don't say
No, they
keep a
said
knife.
watch yourself.
No, they don't say keep weapons.
Watch yourself.
They don't say keep bows and arrows. They don't say keep swords.
They say do what you need to do to protect yourself.
Yes.
Am I wrong?
Yes,
So what did they say?
they say watch your health.
Okay, so how would you watch your health?
Don't
in
go
this society?
bungee jumping.
Okay. so
Actually, bungee
what
jumping
is
is safe. Bungee jumping is very little. He said my nephew proved to me once. Driving is far more dangerous than bungee jumping. Yeah.
That's,
Skydiving is even safer.
I can see that actually.
Yeah. So that's the old funny. He said old funny doggies like me. We think bungee jumping is not safe, but in fact, it actually is very safe.
It's safer.
What
Yeah.
about like I don't know who's right because like and nowadays on the left most of the left side is of Rabbanim, it's people like who it's mainly people like Rav Dror, you know who that is?
Yeah, I know.
Is he like one of these like Yosef Mizrahi types?
No, he's a heretic actually.
Oh, I know who he is. Then.
And then on the right, extreme right, you have people like Yosef Mizrahi.
Yeah.
There's no middle ground.
No, there's no middle ground. It's very hard for him to
Why
find
is
middle
Rob
ground.
Drawer a heretic? I've heard a lot of people don't like him, but I don't know why.
I don't know anything about it.
He told some guy to go to the beach with his wife on Shabbos.
Really?
So a lot of nachos, yes. And stuff.
Well, there's a Gemara. It says that there's the truth from Rav Chaim David HaLevi was Rav in Tel Aviv for many years, and somebody asked him once his wife wants to go to a movie, and he knows he shouldn't be going to a movie. So what should he do? So Chaim David HaLevi said, if your wife really is forced you to go to the movie, but make sure to wear a small knitted yarmulke so people don't think you're a bento or going to a movie. So maybe this Rabbi Dror was, because of showing bias, he was giving some leniency.
No, but he also said being gay is okay.
Huh?
He also said being okay.
Okay.
Being gay is okay.
Okay, that's
It's
very
not the will
strange.
of Hashem to
I'm not familiar with Rabbi Dror. For all I know, he's off the derech. I really don't know anything about him. Okay.
How is a rabbi off the derech?
The word rabbi is not a protected, copyrighted term. Anybody can call themselves rabbi. Yeah, anybody can call themselves rabbi.
I can call myself that.
Anyway, I forgot to ask you another question. Have you ever heard Joe Biden speak?
Yeah.
From what I heard, he doesn't speak very intelligent.
No, he speaks perfectly fine. He's a
Trump
stutterer.
doesn't speak intelligent at all.
Yeah.
What?
Trump does not speak intelligently at all.
He's a stutterer. He was born a stutterer. And you can still tell that he has that problem. He has a speech impediment.
President Trump speaks pretty intelligent.
Well, really?
No.
No.
Kool Alamo didn't know.
Yeah. And that we
I
can all
might not
agree.
agree with Biden,
But
but
I want to get back to the point I began with this. To say who to vote for is something which has no specific source in the Torah.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? It's something which we can argue about what's best for the Jews, what's best for society, and I can have one opinion, and you can have another opinion, and there's nothing to do with the Torah. Now, of course, we hope that who we vote for will be good for the Torah, but the Torah doesn't tell us who to vote for. And that's the important point to remember, except in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, there is actually a question whether you're allowed to vote for a non-religious person. The reason for that being an issue is because there's a last week's parsha, 2 weeks parsha ago, Parashas Shoftim, it says, Som tasim olecha melech, mikerav achicha. You have to put upon yourself a king from amongst your brethren. Amongst your brethren means from people who are shomer Torah mitzvos like yourself.
Well, what about people like Menashe and stuff like that who were kings of?
We didn't appoint them. They took the
They're
kingship.
still-
They usurped the kingship on their own, or they were children of kings. But when you have the choice to appoint a king,
They're
that's
not really
different.
the same, meaning nowadays it's not the same effect of an actual king.
You're right. One could argue. I just remember back in when I was in yeshiva back in 1978 or 79 in Eretz Yisrael, there was the first time a mixed Orthodox non-Orthodox party. And one of the Rosh Yeshiva got up and said, "It's a Maisa Isser to put the ballot for that party into the ballot box because it's not an Orthodox party." So I'm not saying in Eretz Yisrael it is necessarily different today because, most parties say unfortunately are mixers even in Eretz Yisrael, but not all of them. So it's a good question. But the point is Eretz Yisrael is different than Chutz because in Eretz Yisrael there's an additional factor of being a government for Jews who you're allowed to appoint to be the ruler over the Jewish people. If it has to be specifically a religious Jew or not. Oh, Shalom Aleichem. Okay.
Who's laughing downstairs? Who's laughing downstairs?
Okay, everybody, if there are any other questions, we'll stop here for today. Next week I'm going to be switching with Rabbi Saperstein. I'm going to be on Thursdays from now on.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.